You stand on the shore of the ocean watching the tide come in. You sense the call of the sea beckoning to take you further. You step forward little by little, not knowing what to expect, but expecting more. You keep going as the ocean calls you to enter in to deeper waters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast. I'm Nick Peters, your host, seeking to bring you the very best in Christian scholarship and apologetics, and today's show, like all of ours, is no exception. One of the most fundamental questions we can ask about reality is the question, is there a God? And usually we're told, if you think there's a God, well, you just have to take it on faith. You know, there's no real reason to believe there is a God. But is that so? Could there actually be good theistic arguments? To discuss this, I've brought on Dr. Matthew Levering. He holds the James N. and Mary D. Perry Jr. Chair of Theology at Mundelein Seminary. He is the author of over 40 books on topics in dogmatic, sacramental, moral, historical, and biblical theology. He is a translator of Gao Zimri's The Trinity, and with Gao Zimri, he co-edited the Oxford Handbook of the Trinity. Among his books are Scripture and Metaphysics, Aquinas and Renewal of Trinitarian Theology, and Engaging the Doctrine of the Holy Spirit, Love and Gift, and the Training of the Church. He co-edits 2 quarterly journals, Nova et Vetera and International Journal of Systematic Theology. Since 2004, he has been a participant in Evangelicals and Catholics Together, and from 2007 to 2016, he served as chair of the board of the Academy of Catholic Theology. He co-founded the Catholic Theological Initiative and has directed the Center for Scriptural Exegesis, Philosophy, and Doctrine since 2011. So, Dr. Levering, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, if my audience doesn't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to be doing what you're doing?
Well, so I'm just a theologian, and I was trained at Duke and Boston College. And so I got my doctorate there at Boston College in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. And I've taught at different places. I taught at Ave Maria University and at University of Dayton.
Mm-hmm. Now, the book we're talking about is Proofs of God. Now, I said at the start, you know, there are some people, and sadly some Christians, who say, you just have to take God's existence on faith. What do you think about that?
I think if you take God's existence on faith, that's a good start. In fact, oftentimes faith heals and elevates our minds, so that we're able then to reflect, you know, in a more serious way upon the arguments for why we can know that God exists. Mm-hmm. You know, oftentimes, you know, people who have faith are able to think about these matters in a way that's enriched, and the reason is sometimes that you know, our faith in our Lord Jesus Christ enables us to realize that the problem of evil has an answer, and that answer is the love of God in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. You know, whereas sometimes people without faith are struck so deeply by the problem of evil that they just simply get disoriented, it seems, and they're not able then really to consider the real arguments on both sides in terms of whether God exists.
Yeah, that's something interesting about your book also, because you do have arguments on both sides. Someone wanting proofs of God might be surprised to pick up and wait, David Hume is in here?
That's right.
Wittgenstein is in here? I mean, whose side are you on?
Yeah, the arguments are all there. It goes back to Michel de Montaigne, the French thinker. He develops the essential arguments that David Hume later puts forward. Mm-hmm. So, he's a skeptic thinker from the period of intense warfare between Catholics and Protestants. Of course, they had all sorts of political reasons why they were fighting. Mm-hmm. But he himself, developed a very deep skepticism, and that influenced David Hume. Mm-hmm. And Hume is the one who's behind Kant. So that's kind of your lineage. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we've said that faith is a good thing, but are there really arguments that can be used for God's existence?
Yeah, absolutely. There's arguments, that God exists, and the arguments were the main arguments really were discovered in the ancient period already by the time of Aristotle and Aristotle's successors. Essentially, they already have the basic arguments, at their fingertips, as it were. So again, that when Christianity. When the gospel began to be proclaimed, one reason why it was able to catch the minds of the society, one reason honestly was that they were ready to believe in God because they knew that there was a God. They knew that.
It's quite interesting to me to see that all these arguments against atheism, we've had them for thousands of years. It's not as if atheism suddenly showed up on the scene after the Enlightenment and said, oh my gosh, we got to come up with arguments for God's existence. They were already right there waiting.
Yeah, they're there. Yeah, the arguments are there, but so I don't really understand atheism that well. I assume that I don't know. I don't really understand. It could be simply a lack of education, honestly. So when you read Hume, or when you read Kant, and they try to summarize the arguments for God's existence, Kant, for example, gives an account of what these arguments are. He doesn't know them at all. He never read them. Has no contact with them. He's completely. So, and the same thing for Hume. He just simply doesn't understand what the arguments are. He doesn't understand, and so essentially, it's kind of a tragedy, really. There was. It seems as though there must have been some kind of a break in education where they just simply weren't really getting educated in the Christian the past, the Christian past, the thought of the great Christian thinkers, as well as the ancients, such as Aristotle. Who knows?
And that trend has sadly continued today. I meet very few atheists who really engage with the best arguments on the other side. I remember when I was in seminary, and I read Richard Dawkins's The God Delusion, and he started going through the 5 arguments for Aquinas. Now I talk to people and say, I can be absolutely sure of one thing. He has never, ever read the arguments for Aquinas. He's probably looked up a Wikipedia page or something about them. They aren't convinced. His refutations are not convincing to anyone who's studied the Thomistic arguments for any amount of time.
That's true, but one thing I try to point out in my book, because a lot of times it is the case that Christians who are reflecting upon God's existence tend to go first to Thomas Aquinas, and I think there's good reasons to do so.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it is important to realize that the fathers of the church all knew the basic proofs, and they would use them and mention them. So I have work in the book. I have material. I have accounts of Augustine, but also Greek fathers. I do. Gregory of Nazianzus is my representative there, but if there's a book by Yaroslav Pelikan that sort of lays it all out, but I kind of just in a few pages, you get the basic point from Gregory of Nazianzus and John of Damascus. Those are the two thinkers from the Greek fathers, but the proofs are there. That's what I found, and what I found very interesting because the Greek fathers are intensely Christ-centered. Their minds are formed by faith, but the proofs of God's existence are part of their theological work, part of the work by which they help Christians understand, who this God is that we worship. So that's one of the functions of the proofs of God's existence, is it helps Christians avoid kind of making God into some sort of finite reality. It strengthens our minds. It refines our thinking.
That kind of thing kind of leads me very well, because it seems related to the next thing I was going to ask about, that we have some friends in the presuppositionist reformed camp and such. You say, well, here's the problem with all these proofs of God's existence. None of them get you to the Christian God. None of them get you to Jesus. None of them get you to the Trinity or anything of that sort. So since they don't get you explicitly to a Christian God, we shouldn't accept them.
Well, so the only answer to that is you got to just kind of think to yourself, well, what do they achieve?
Right.
And so what they achieve is that they help that essentially that an infinite source of all being, an infinite source of all goodness, is a reality. But of course if you have faith, you don't really need to know that through philosophical reasoning. So for the person of faith, what this philosophical reasoning does is help to purify the mind of our constant tendency to want to think of God as in a finite way. Mm-hmm. Honestly, that's a problem, is that we have a tendency to want to think of God as a big guy up in the sky. even Christians.
Yeah.
So when we think of the Trinity, we tend to think of three persons, and then we tend to think of like the Son and the Spirit. Well, they kind of do like a Wonder Twin Powers act, and the Son sort of descends from the sky, and kind of enters into the human nature, or whatever. Yeah. And then the Holy Spirit sort of zooms in from the left-hand corner. Mm-hmm. in other words, we have a very a tendency. We're just human. We have a tendency to think about God as though, and to speak about God as though God were a creature. But God's not a creature, and that's one of the really important things that the proofs of God help us to reflect upon.
Yeah, I've said if we went to medieval times, we could get Moses Maimonides, the Jew, Avicenna, the Muslim, and Thomas Aquinas, a Christian, and they could all sit in together and they would all agree on the proofs of God, pretty much. But then they'd have to go in and say, now we have to argue which one of us has the right God at that point.
Well, the proofs of God they don't really establish that much. They just simply get you to the fact that there is a reality that is not a creature. That's the source of all finite being. And that's kind of, that's what they do. But that's not a personal God. It's a God who is infinitely perfect. But there's no God who reaches out, who loves us, who redeems us. But essentially, the truth is nobody begins with the proofs. At least I don't see why you would. The proofs are not kind of a beginning point. Mm-hmm. They're intended to strengthen the mind and to refine, to purify our thinking about the God whom we worship. And so that's the case whether you're Jewish or Muslim, or Christian. In other words, the proofs do strengthen and refine. They also help you argue in public, because sometimes I have run into this. It's quite distressing. That sometimes people think of God as like the Easter Bunny, or sometimes you might even have this sense of God as the Great Pumpkin. Where we're all kind of waiting in the pumpkin patch. Where is this guy? So the proofs of God remind us essentially that God's not a creature, and that there is an infinite source of all created being. That's the fundamental.
Yeah, as someone who had Peanuts comic strips growing up in my life, I really understand what you're saying there. Now, we talked some about how the church fathers had these proofs. They actually didn't really originate many of them on their own. You'd see these in Plato, Aristotle, and others beforehand.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You do. But now remember, though, these Plato and Aristotle are sort of working by as it were the grace that, I don't know if you want to call it grace, but certainly by the gift of created reason. And so you don't want to kind of say that Plato and Aristotle they know the true God. No one's saying that. What happens in Plato and Aristotle is that they come to know certain things, certain ways, certain paths of moving beyond materialism. Moving beyond the idea that only the material is real. That's what's happening in Plato and Aristotle, that they're moving beyond this notion, that only matter, only the cosmos, only what is empirical is real. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're doing that, and it's important what they're doing.
And when we look at these proofs of God, even as Christians, it's okay to say, I don't really find this one convincing. Like if you look at the ontological argument, I don't find it convincing. In modern times, I don't really care for scientific arguments for theism. And that's okay.
That's right. It doesn't matter. It's for our faith. When we use arguments for God's existence, it's really we're attempting to refine our thinking. I've said that a couple times, but our faith doesn't depend upon in any way. These proofs, of course, it's biblical. St. Paul teaches that God can be known. Yeah, so it's a biblical truth that we can know God's existence.
So let's start going through some of the proofs that we have. When we get to Tertullian, you say he's the first one who really starts presenting these arguments. What does Tertullian say?
Okay, well, let me open up here the book here. Yeah, good old Tertullian. Well, he's mainly, of course, he's drawing on the ancient traditions, Stoicism and whatnot. So there's nothing new in Tertullian. It's the main interest for me in Tertullian is this fact that Tertullian is known for his claim that there's no relationship between Athens and Jerusalem. What does Athens matter to Jerusalem? Yeah. That kind of thing. But, I think that's essentially the reason why, I threw Tertullian into the book, because he does insist against Marcion. Mm-hmm. He's fighting with Marcion, and the whole kind of the dualism, that you have sort of an evil force and a good force and so on. And Tertullian insists that the creator God, the creator, has made himself known. Tertullian's really building upon St. Paul, huh? Yeah. Has made himself known through creatures. And so he argues that even during the period of idolatry, Tertullian says that the knowledge of God never disappeared. So there always was some true knowledge of God, according to Tertullian. Again, his arguments, are attempting to show that Marcion is wrong. That kind of dualism, that kind of anti-creator. That's what he's employing these Greek philosophers, mainly Stoic and Origen, to show that Marcion is not correct. But he doesn't really trace out any of the proofs of God in detail. Mm-hmm. He just simply refers to them as kind of common cultural knowledge. Yeah, it's just something that is available in the culture, and he just simply kind of generally just refers to them.
What difference though does refuting Marcion though make to proofs of God? Why should we care today about refuting someone who lived in the 2nd century?
Well, the whole question is coming down to whether the whole issue of the creation. Really, that's Marcion's concern is that matter. He thinks matter is evil, and so So that's kind of, that's what's up, and so in our own time, we're dealing with a different angle on this. But I think we still have a certain kind of Gnosticism going on. That Marcion, that sort of dualism is intensely pessimistic about the world, and I think that if you actually look at the great the leading current atheists, you'll get atheists who say that it is a sin to bring a child into the world. For example, it's that it's evil. An atheist would say that it's evil. There are leading atheists that talk about this, like it's evil to bring children into the world. Mm. So there's a deep pessimism, a deep sense of the darkness of existence. Mm. And that's really what's behind Marcion, and today we're fighting the same fight essentially. It's Christians insisting upon the fact that reality is rooted in infinite goodness. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd like to remind everyone that you're listening to a Deeper Waters podcast. We've got Dr. Matthew Levering here talking about his book, Proofs of God. But if you're here next week, it's September is Suicide Prevention Month. And so that I'm going to be bringing my favorite guest on, and I'm sure Dr. Levering will understand when I say who it is. That's no slight. My wife, a suicide survivor, is going to be joining us to talk about the topic. So I think anyone can understand why I say my wife is my favorite guest to have on the show here. So Allie and I will be here together next week talking about suicide and suicide prevention. But for now, let's get back to Dr. Levering. And, that whole suicide prevention thing, that does fit in with what you were saying about the way that the world is viewed today, a dark, dismal place, and no good bringing life into it and things of that sort, doesn't it?
That's right. Essentially today, you have this sense that material things, such as ourselves, we're insofar as we're material, but of course for an atheist, we're just simply matter. And basically the idea is that we're all headed to eternal annihilation. Just tremendous darkness, tremendous, everlasting annihilation of everything. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of dark. So anyway, the good news is found in Jesus Christ. But the point is, though, that ancient philosophers were already addressing this type of skepticism, and they were moving out of it. They were refining their understanding, moving away from worship of the gods, because they knew that was false. Mm-hmm. And as they moved away from worship of the gods, they were also, refining their understanding of what it. How do you go about, not just simply becoming essentially a skeptical materialist, because of course there was ancient materialism, which believed that matter was the only reality. That was the philosophical option in the time.
Now, another one you bring up, I think he does come later chronologically than Augustine, but Augustine's such a big figure, we should wait till later. Gregory of Nyssa, I think that's how you pronounce it and such.
Or Nazianzus.
Yeah. Nazianzus, okay.
Okay.
What did he argue?
Well, so he's kind of, he's got more arguments, certainly more than, he spells them out more. There's again, it's that they're appealing to these arguments that are simply in the culture. Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily have to spell them all that much, but he's doing things like demonstrating that God fills all things without being bodily. Let me give one of the arguments.
Okay.
The basic idea is that God is not in the order of moving or moved things that depend upon something else to be moved. And so this is the basic Thomistic argument from causality, and of course it comes from Aristotle. Yeah, it's a basic, and the whole question, as Gregory points out, is like how is the whole moved? So now movement is actuality. Movement is going from potency to action to moving. It's being or act. And so the question is this for Gregory. He just says, look, you got a cosmos, and everything in the cosmos is related to the other things in actuality, in movement. But he says, who moves the whole cosmos? How did the whole cosmos is yet another thing. So it too would have to depend upon a mover. Mm-hmm. Since it's just a finite reality. The cosmos itself is a finite reality, so it too would have to depend upon a mover. And if you add another finite mover, then you get essentially another finite mover is just part of the cosmos again. So the cosmos is just simply all finite movers. And so there has to be an infinite mover. That's the basic idea that he's putting out.
I think it's important to understand macros. We can say the same thing later on when we get to Thomas Aquinas, that sometimes when people see motion, they think, Isaac Newton, we already dealt with that one.
Yeah, but it's not that. Yeah, that's right. It's not. People get, in their mind, they get the impression of like things moving across the screen or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not what it is. It's what we're talking about here is the act of being of finite things, just their sheer being.
And there are some people out today who also on the Christian side sadly embrace the idea that God himself is being moved. So the open theism has the most moved mover.
Oh no! Well, that would just turn. Well, that just makes God into finite, into like a big thing, a big rational, a big finite rational thing.
He could kind of be like a Superman figure.
That's right. But he couldn't be the creator of all things. He couldn't be the one who sustains all being. He couldn't. So, but Aristotle helped us out here by distinguishing potency and act and getting us thinking in terms of actuality. So there we could realize that there's different modes of actuality, of finite actuality. So that a rock has a mode of existing, a mode of being in act.
Yeah, but
Aristotle helped us out.
There are some Christians who look at this and say, yeah, but this is Greek thought, and this is Greek thought polluting our Christianity. Christianity's Jewish. It's not Greek. So we need to just avoid this Greek terminology and such.
But what I would say that, there's a number of proofs that you can find in Scripture itself. But to me, Romans 1, 19 to 20, that's pretty important. Mm-hmm. But if so, what you going to do with that? Mm-hmm. But anyway, to me, like a Christian who doesn't want these proofs, it doesn't bother me that much. Let him embrace the Lord and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But the danger of not paying attention to these proofs is that you could wind up, in a situation where you worship a finite God. You might even worship three finite gods. You could fall into tritheism. Essentially these proofs are just simply ways of refining our mind and helping us move beyond, move mentally beyond some sort of materialism where everything has to be finite. Yeah.
We could just simply say, all truth is God's truth. It doesn't matter if it comes from the Greeks or anywhere else. If it's true, it's from God.
That's right. And you got to realize that there's a good bit of this truth was picked up by the New Testament. Mm-hmm. I'm really trying to emphasize that point.
Mm-hmm. Now we get to Augustine, who I do believe does come before Gregory, though, but Augustine is such a major figure in church history. All three branches of Christianity pay great attention to Augustine, even if they don't agree with him on everything. But what proofs did Augustine give us?
So with Augustine, he's obviously not as inspired by Aristotle. Mm-hmm. He read Aristotle. He knew Aristotle somewhat, but he's going to move in the direction of the Neoplatonic proofs that you get from Plotinus and many other. Plotinus wasn't the only Neoplatonist, but of course we do need to realize that Plotinus was profoundly read in Aristotle and Plato. So it's not as though this sort of comes from nowhere and Plotinus sort of jumps in. Plotinus was weaving together in certain ways Aristotle and Plato, and so essentially when Augustine's trying to think of a proof, that what he'll do is he'll move inside himself. He'll move interiorly, into the perfections of being. So he'll move, and he'll see truth. For example, this is argument, typical argument of Augustine, is that he sees that you move inside yourself and you know a truth, like 2 + 2 = 4 or something like that. And so it's like, where did that truth come from? What grounds that truth? Because you don't ground the truth. The truth doesn't depend on you. It doesn't depend on your mind. So where's the ground of that truth? It's an eternal truth, but where's the ground of it? And so Augustine will then move deeper and see that the light of truth, he moves from a particular truth about a material thing he moves into Platonic mode into simply truth itself. So if you've ever read Plato's Republic or something like that, it's the same basic idea, but he moves from the particular thing, the particular truth, and he realizes that truth is not material. It doesn't depend upon matter. Whether or not there was matter, there'd still be this truth. So he moves into a sense of an infinite ground of goodness and truth and being. That he does it first by moving interior into the mind.
Yeah. And we also can't forget his famous slogan, "You have made us for yourselves, and our hearts are restless until they find our peace in you."
Amen, brother. Amen. And he means by that, he doesn't mean any God that we could prove. He means simply the Lord revealed by Jesus Christ. But remember, the Lord revealed by Jesus Christ is not a finite creature. So he's the creator. He's the Logos, and he gave to his human creatures reason by which we could seek him. So.
Now, as we move further, before we get to my personal favorite, there is definitely Anselm, as we talk about. Anselm kind of revolutionized things because he did come up with a very original argument, didn't he?
Well, Anselm, yeah, you can say. I mean, it's influenced by Augustine, of course. So I mean, it is. Anselm's argument would be heavily influenced by that Neoplatonic strain of thinking, where for Anselm, the key to understanding Anselm's argument, in my view, would be this: that you got to realize that the order of being, so just think of the order of being, which is all things that are in the finite mode, and so for Anselm, that order, is an order of reason, an order because it's created by the Logos. You see what? So being and wisdom are interchangeable. For Anselm. And so at that point, if you can show that something, Anselm then moves to show that if you can think something, and you think that the thing that which nothing greater can exist, if you can think it, it must exist, or else, of course, it wouldn't be that which nothing greater can exist. Do you see what I mean? But so he's drawing together the order of reason and the order of being in a way that Aristotle would correct him on this a bit.
I've heard it that if you look at great thinkers, atheists and theists alike, after Anselm, pretty much everyone has something to say about the ontological argument.
It gets remembered. It does. It really does have. But you got to remember that in part why the later thinkers are attracted to the ontological argument is that a lot of these later thinkers that about are what you would call idealists, or people who focus upon the mind. So that would be the case certainly with Immanuel Kant. Mm-hmm. That's why he's so interested in Anselm's argument, because he himself thinks that reality is essentially what we can know in the categories of our mind.
Mm-hmm. Phenomena.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like what my seminary professor of philosophy said about the ontological argument. He said, William Lane Craig is convinced by it. Alvin Plantinga is convinced by it. Jesus isn't.
Well, William Lane Craig is a brilliant man. He came here to speak at the seminary where I teach, Mundelein Seminary, and I got to meet him. I don't think I sent him a book that I wrote, but I don't know that he remembers me. But he's obviously, he has a strong legal mind, but I think he's I'm not sure that he's really that well read in ancient philosophy.
Well, I like to remind everyone at this point that you're listening to the Deeper Waters podcast, and everything we do is supported by listeners like you. And if you want to help us out, go to my website at deeperwatersapologetics.com, and you'll find a link on the side here. It says, help support the work of Deeper Waters Christian Ministries. Where, when you go there, you'll be taken to the ministry of Risen Jesus instead. Have you gone to the right place? Did my website mess up? Did Mike Licona hack into my website? No, everything's working fine. The reason you go to Mike Licona's website is Mike and his wife Debbie are my in-laws. And so when you make your donation, you do it through their ministry, Risen Jesus. When you get in touch with them or me or my wife Allie and say, hey, I made a donation. I want to go to Nick Peters. I want to go to Deeper Waters. We will get that donation, and it will be tax deductible. And we also have an ebook area with ebooks I've written, such as A Creed for the Ages, The Apostles' Creed, and Today's Christian, or co-written Defining Inerrancy, Groundless, God and Natural Disasters, and others. And we've got one more way you can support us here. Now, Dr. Levering, I saw in show prep, I think it was your wife helping you out here. Does she like jewelry?
I admit that she does not.
Wow.
I don't know why.
Well, we have the first one because usually most of them do like jewelry. And we have a jewelry store here at Shorty. We've got a friend who runs that one for us. And whatever you purchase from that jewelry store, just get back to touch with me and let me know. 25% of that goes to Deeper Waters. So, guys, you know what I always tell you. You can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up for that screw-up that you recently did with her. Or you can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up for that screw-up that I know you're going to make with her. And if you can't do any of these, share a podcast with friends and such, and go on iTunes and leave a review of a Deeper Waters podcast. A good positive review. I love to see those. Now, Dr. Levering, do you have an organization or a charity you'd like to see people donate to?
I don't. You asked me before.
Yeah.
We donate to local things like but and then I've just forgotten the name of we donate to pro life ministries essentially.
Oh.
But unfortunately, it's in my mind and I haven't. So that's one of the things we donate to.
Okay.
But,
well, if anyone's interested, just go back and check out archives. Pretty much every January, we devote to abortion, and you'll find several great causes that you can support there. Now, let's get back to the proofs of God, and let's get to my very favorite. And this can surprise a lot of people because, you're Catholic, I'm Protestant, but Thomas Aquinas is still the guy to go to.
I love Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah. And we talked earlier about how Richard Dawkins gets the proofs wrong, but even you said in your book a professional philosopher like Graham Oppy seems to get the Thomistic arguments wrong, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's sort of sad. It's I don't understand.
Mhm.
Honestly, they draw upon. It looks to me like they're drawing upon some 17th or 18th century sources. But not really reading Aquinas. So but why they're not, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's and of course there's a number of wonderful books, much better than. I mean, my book is a little handbook where you can go through many different thinkers and kind of get the key point.
Yeah.
But there's, in terms of Aquinas, there's books by Dennis Turner, very very valuable book, and an extremely valuable work by Edward Feser.
Oh yes.
And so he's really the master. There's many others. It's but I do. Edward Feser has a wonderful book that's not just Aquinas, it's Five Thinkers, essentially five proofs of God. Yeah. And I really just can't speak highly enough about that book. It's just a great book. But again, Aquinas, it's not, again, for Aquinas, the proofs of God they function in order to help purify the mind of the Christian as we read about the God who names himself, I am who I am, and so on. In other words, for Aquinas, the proofs of God are not intended, to sort of, okay, now we got God's existence proofs, and now we can go see what we think about Jesus. You know what I mean? It's not like that. It's that we come to faith, and our faith is strong because our faith is not irrational. I mean that's an important part, but also it helps to refine our minds and purify as we think about God.
Now, in all fairness, if you took the average layman in any church, Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox, and they did sit down and read the arguments from Aquinas, they might look and say, what's the argument here? Because it really is difficult to understand if you're not familiar with the categories, isn't it?
I think so. It's essentially the problem oftentimes comes down to a failure to really think about the whole difference between potentiality and actuality. So that becomes a problem for people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know, but I've never, myself, I've never thought that the proofs were particularly difficult. They make sense to me. Aquinas' proofs in terms of from causality.
Yeah. Let's look at one of his arguments as well, and that would be the fifth one. Because in today's day and age, people look and say, that's the intelligent design movement right there. Right? That's not really what it is it?
So the fifth one is essentially based on the fact that anything, moves to an end, and anything moves to a goal. So you could be thinking about the whole cosmos, which is everything finite. I mean, sometimes people talk about like multiple, like what if we have multiple universes? Well, that's still, in Aquinas' view, that'd still be the same. That'd still be the one entity that we call the cosmos, essentially the finite realm, the realm of finite things. But the point is that in the fifth way, what you think about, you don't have to think about the whole cosmos. You can simply just think about why does that one bird, move in a teleological way. Why they're ordered toward an end, but they're not rational. Yeah. Or you could think of a tree, or even like a rock with gravity.
I think Feser uses an iceberg floating in the ocean. Says it makes the water colder. It does not turn the water into cotton candy.
That's it. So why is there order? Why is there order? That's the key question, because you got, and of course John of Damascus had the same argument, but it's the question is like, why is we take it for granted? We take it for granted that there would be order in a cosmos that and so there is order, there is teleological order, and these things are not rational, and so why? There must be a cause. There must be a cause of any teleology or just movement toward a goal on the part of non-rational things. What I mean by movement toward a goal, of course, is regular movements that recur repeatedly, but are being done by non-rational agents and don't involve creatures that have mind and in the sense of rational freedom.
I'm glad you also said the multiverse isn't a defeater in these arguments as well, and I think we should add in another one here, and that would be the idea of evolution. For instance, it's not a defeater either.
Oh no! Yeah, no.
Etienne Gerson would go so far as to say that evolution is essentially teleological, because in evolution everything does act towards an end, survivor and production and such. So I think it's in his book From Aristotle to Darwin and Back Again.
A very brilliant book. A very important book. Yeah, it's good.
Now let's talk some about the skeptics here, since Hume, for instance. Hume is one of the most famous ones, and of course one of the main arguments he brings out is the argument from Eva.
Yeah, that's true. But Hume, I think the main thing he does is he gets rid of the argument from causality. And of course that basic argument, which you do find in, he didn't know Aquinas' version of it. But what he realized, he's getting this from Montaigne, skepticism really. He just says that there really is no real relation between cause and effect. In other words, you might just one day have an effect that didn't have a cause. You know what I mean? And so he instead of recognizing the unity of cause and effect, he simply says maybe you can just have the effect, and so you don't need a cause. He says we have no way of claiming that you would actually ever need a cause, and so on. So that's kind of the key thing that he does, and that is taken forward then, by all the contemporary atheists. Just that basic line.
And of course, we have his famous argument against miracles as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. He certainly would be a materialist of a kind, but again, the interesting thing for me about Hume is that everything in Hume relies upon this idea, which is completely, when you think about it, it's completely nonsensical. It's way more crazy than believing in supernatural miracles or something. And the idea just simply is that all of a sudden you might actually have an effect, which means like a finite reality that comes from nothing. But that literally has no cause whatsoever. I mean, to me, that's complete right there. That's, the imagination and the kind of the willful suspension of common sense. You have to come to think of that idea. That requires a lot of faith. Faith in the sense of kind of nonsense, not faith in the Christian sense.
Now, when I was in seminary, my professor taught me kind of referred to Kant as the sort of antithesis of Aquinas. I think that Kant would be, you would almost read Aquinas, I think he was arguing against Kant. So Kant, I think he was a believer in God, but he didn't think the proofs worked.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Kant is an interesting character because I criticized Kant to somebody, and then they reminded me, and this was they reminded me before I published the book, so I was able to make a change in the book. They said to me that, hey, wait a second, Kant does have one proof for God's existence. It's based on his whole understanding of practical reason, and he basically says that if God didn't exist, if God didn't exist, then you would never have a reason to do anything, because your practical reason, you seek happiness, and yet you know that you're not going to find happiness in this life. So if God and eternal life don't exist, there's no reason to do a single thing. I mean, I don't know. The conscious scholar would give you a more complex account of that argument, but it's the argument from practical reason. And Kant says that it's a postulate. It's not an argument from as it were speculative reason. It's a postulate of practical reason. Practical reason being what we do to move toward ends. So at least Kant has that.
And then we can also move further on in our time, and you get to Wittgenstein, who also argued. I think Bertrand Russell said he was responsible for 2 great philosophical revolutions, wasn't he?
Yeah, Wittgenstein, a very complex, a very powerful thinker.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, when real philosophers read my book, whether they think I got Wittgenstein correct. I mean, I read Wittgenstein, but my thought on Wittgenstein was taken really from my friend Steve Long. Mm-hmm. Steve is a Thomistic philosopher, and he's read quite widely. And but anyhow, so Wittgenstein with the whole idea of the language games and distinct languages, that sort of stuff. Wittgenstein is sort of, what part of Wittgenstein should we talk about? You tell me. Yeah, certainly a fascinating thinker.
Well, whichever one you think is the most important, because we've only got a few minutes left, and you know much more about him than I do.
Yeah. Well, so I wish I did really. I got a funny story about all this. Is that when I wrote my section on Heidegger, this friend of mine who was reading the manuscript for me said, but wasn't a philosopher, said, look, he didn't understand my section on Heidegger. And I said, well, I didn't understand it either, but I know I got it right. So Wittgenstein, what's he doing? I mean, he essentially thinks that you can't. It's stuff like you can't ask the question of why something exists than nothing. I mean, he simply gets to the point really where you can't ask that question, because it doesn't fit within a particular language game. It sort of goes outside any particular language game. In my view, what's going on with Wittgenstein is he's a brilliant thinker, an incredible genius, working within the conscience system. Mm-hmm. So within the conscience system, you can only talk about, you only have these categories of the mind, and so that's really what's up. And what Wittgenstein is doing is putting pressure on that conscience system and saying, hey, if these are the categories of the mind, he's trying to show that it's not just the individual, it's the whole culture and so on. But truth be told, I don't know that I can give an adequate account of Wittgenstein. I mean, he's pointing toward mystery. He is trying to do that. He's trying to say that that there's a riddle, but even though we can't ask it, we can't talk about it, and there's something like Karl Barth here, where he's saying because these guys are moving after Kant, or it's more like Heidegger maybe. After Kant, basically you can't talk about these realities. You can't talk about God because God is not within the finite. Our concepts are finite. We can't move outside the temporal, spatial bounds of our finite concepts, and so you can't even think about God. That's Heidegger, and that's Wittgenstein. But what you can do, perhaps, is point or gesture, toward some mystery, and Wittgenstein tries to do that.
As we get near the end, I think something you said a while ago is appropriate. How you said, you give kind of like a little snapshot of Aquinas. If you want a further version, go to Fesser and others. And I think you'd say about everyone in your book, no one should pick up your book and read and say, well, I'm going to make my decision on this side. But your hope, I think, would be that you'd look at it and you'd say, now that thinker seems interesting. I want to go back and read him.
That's true. But now it's also the case, though, that my book is I give a number of quotations in the book. I mean, so you really will get the basic text. You'll get a lot of text in my book. It's not an anthology,
yeah,
but you are going to get a lot of text, and so you'll be able to see if your mind is trained. You'll be able to see the basic line of argument in each thinker. But on the other hand, I do have to say that this book is introductory.
Yeah.
It's and so the main intention of it is just to bring essentially remind ourselves that apologetics is not a separate task from theology. That it belongs to theology. So I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm a believer in the Holy Trinity. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I don't need to think about apologetics and think about the mystery of God's existence. I need to do that. Mm-hmm. And there's a call upon each Christian, to really take seriously, the question of our culture. One question is it rational? Is it reasonable? To believe in God, or is it just like the Great Pumpkin? Mm-hmm. And so it's important to give people essentially the book. If you read the book, you'll get a sense of all the positions available, and you can work from there. But the main purpose of the book, is just essentially it's a theological book. The main purpose is that, hey, we get, being a theologian, being a Christian, involves defending the faith and thinking about the realities of our faith.
And if you're interested in the book, as of the time of this recording right now, on Amazon, the Kindle version is $14.85. The paperback is $19.20. That's Proofs of God, Dr. Matthew Levering. Now, Dr. Levering, do you have a blog, a website, an email where people can get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
You can always email me at my Mundelein Seminary email address, which is online. But you know what? I think even there, I probably my email address there is mlevering at usml.edu. But even there, probably just use my Yahoo account. But I use my Yahoo account, and my Yahoo account is mj. J is my wife, from a wife's name, Joy. MJ Levering at yahoo.com. Yeah, I like having emails. But I tell you what, I should say one more thing though, which is that if there's atheists who are watching, hey, don't argue with me. You should argue with Ed Feser or one of these. You probably know Edward Feser's blog.
Oh yeah, go there and here.
That's right. He'll straighten you out, But you should read my book to get a sense of what all the options really are, though. That's what you do with my book.
Now, do you have any final words you'd like to leave today for the Deeper Waters audience?
Well, I just praise God that this exists and that we're trying to spread the gospel here. Mm-hmm. Very grateful for ecumenical work in the United States among fellow Christians. I mean, as we deal with the fact that that there's so much need for renewal, so much need for Christian proclamation, so much need for our own increasing in depth of holiness and our own sanctification, our own reliance upon Jesus. And so I just really we wanted to say a prayer that people listening are, raising their minds to the Lord, trusting the Lord, and realizing that the world that we see it as a very beautiful creation of God, that the Lord is in charge, and this life is not the end. I mean, I guess that.
Yeah, I think it's amusing when you talk about ecumenicalism, because my wife right now has been exploring Eastern Orthodoxy and such, so she's asking a lot of questions. And when you said, I think Okay, I'm saying I'm a Protestant I'm interviewing a Catholic scholar about to go to an Orthodox church. I mean, how do you get more ecumenical than that?
Well, I love it, and of course, anyone who's a Catholic, we love the Orthodox. I mean, it's such a beautiful liturgy. It's a good lesson for the Catholic. Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Levering, we'd like to thank you for taking your time to come on here, and hopefully we'll see you back here again sometime.
Hey, thanks so much. It's a privilege. Thanks so much.
Everyone, next week, my wife is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about suicide, how serious the topic it is, and what we can do to stop it. For now, I'm Nick Peters, and I'm signing off.